Hello there, everyone. My name is Mohammed, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Enlighten. Today, our guest is Jafaru Egieya. Jafaru is a postdoctoral research fellow with the African Research University Alliance Center of Excellence in Energy at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. He has a doctorate in chemical engineering from the University of Cape Town, with a research expertise in the field of supply chain optimization of alternative energy generation. He also possesses a master's degree in nuclear engineering with a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, both obtained from the University of Port Harcourt, Nigeria. He has over 7 years of experience working as a scientific officer with the Nigeria Atomic Energy Commission. He also has previous stints working as a business development analyst at a light manufacturing firm in Nigeria. His current research involves the use of system dynamics modeling to assess the trade-offs and synergies in the water-food energy nexus within the African context. Jafaru, thank you for coming to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you for reading my citation.
So I have several questions for you. My first question is that we are both coming from Africa and from, economically speaking, two similar countries. So I'm from Algeria and Jafaru is from Nigeria. Both countries' GDP is primarily built around fossil fuels exports, whether it's oil or natural gas. Algeria, for instance, exports GDP is based about 19% from fossil fuels exports, and I believe that Nigeria is estimated around 14%. So taking this as a starting point, how can Nigeria and maybe also Algeria diversify its economy and reduce its dependence on oil to achieve sustainable economic growth?
Thank you, Mohammed, for that question. So if I get you correctly, how can Nigeria, which is my perspective, diversify its economy from the use of fossil fuel? There are several ways we can do that. Nigeria can do that, but I'll mention two, or maybe we can go to three. But the first one is that before the finding of oil, before oil was found in Nigeria in the 1950s, Nigeria's economy was based on agriculture. In fact, you could say that agriculture was the mainstay. And for example, Malaysia, which has 2.5% of its GDP based on palm oil or oil palm, got their oil palm seedlings from Nigeria. So one example of diversifying our economy from fossil fuel is to invest more in agriculture. Another aspect or sector that can be a very good opportunity for diversification is moving into tourism. We have various beautiful scenery in Nigeria. I live in Abuja, and there's what we call the Aso Rock. Aso Rock is about 1,000 meters above the ground, and it's equivalent in height with the Table Mountain in South Africa, where I live, where I do my research in Stellenbosch. That is a very good example of something that can be used to make money, and it has not been tapped. So diversifying into tourism, diversifying into agriculture are opportunities. But we cannot do these without an enabling environment. In the past few years, Nigeria has grappled with security challenges. If we want to invite investors to Nigeria, we need to make them have confidence in our security. So enabling environment for investors to come in involves more security consciousness, more guarantees that there's security. And diversifying, again, you could say, the third point I can say to add to that is that entrepreneurs are coming up. So my government needs to put policies in place to encourage entrepreneurs, tax incentives, and even grants, so that they can bring up their businesses, incubators, and other startups to the fore.
I think this is also very similar to Algeria. So the main problem is that in Algeria, we are not really taking care of the agricultural sector output. And the
Yes.
second, relatively, Algeria is also not safe place for investments. And so I believe that this is why we cannot actually have a sustainable and sustained economic growth in the country. But I think this is the problem for all African nations, I guess. And I think Africans should work collaboratively to address such challenges. So
Yeah,
I have
but
my
South
second question.
Africa to a large, yes, go on. Now, I'm just saying South Africa to a large extent, even though they have a high crime rates, we could learn from them. So just like peer cities, their peer city, how did they develop their tourism sector? We can learn from them and translate that since we're in the same geographical location. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So my second question is actually related to the first one. So we know that there is great potential in African countries to develop clean energy and especially solar energy. So how can Nigeria, for instance, increase access to reliable and sustainable energy to support economic growth and improve also food security, which also implies moving forward and pushing the agricultural sector?
Okay. Thank you, Mohammed, for the question. So there are two sides to the question. How can Nigeria improve sustainable energy, most renewable energy, especially solar energy? And how can that help food security? So I'll start with the first part of the question. How can we increase the contribution of renewable energy into Nigeria's energy mix, which is basically, as we stated before, more fossil fuel dependent? There are several reasons. Two reasons that come to mind are, first, our grid. The electricity grid needs to be retrofitted. Our grid is old. In fact, last year, our grid collapsed more than 20 times. So sometimes the whole country can go into blackout. So the grid needs to be retrofitted and improved so that we can wheel electricity. If we're using solar energy that is being wheeled into the electricity grid, the grid will not collapse by taking up such electricity generations. The second one is that off-grid, there should be off-grid opportunities. Private companies or private organizations who want to develop off-grid generation capacities. And off-grid generation capacities include solar energy, wind energy, so or mini hydro energy sources. Government needs to put in place enabling environments, tax incentives, and even capital for such companies to be able to invest so that there can be sustainable energy production and supply, even more importantly to people in the rural areas. Now, how does it lead to food security? It's always said that between 40 to 50% of foodstuff, especially in developing countries, that is being agricultural crops or crops that are being grown, over 50% before they get to the consumers are wasted during transportation. If you have constant source of electricity, there can be refrigeration. Refrigeration is a form of storage. So there will be no spoilage. It will minimize that. So that is one thing. If solar energy, such sources of solar energy comes into play, that can help improve food security and by extension, improve well-being. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you for your comprehensive and conclusive reply, Jafaru. That's very interesting. So my third question is actually related to Africa as a continent. So from a continental perspective, how can Africa effectively manage its transboundary water resources to ensure equitable and sustainable access to water for all its citizens, while also protecting other ecosystems and including both fauna and flora?
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. That's a mouthful and big words there. But I'll tie it to what I'm currently doing at Stellenbosch University. I'm modeling water energy food nexus. Water energy food nexus involves you assessing how the use of water impacts energy and how energy impacts agriculture or food production. So it's like a circle or a triangular interaction. Such information can be used by various transboundary countries, because water is transboundary. What we mean by transboundary, it crosses different countries. Such information can enable countries to plan usage, to minimize the silo. Water energy food nexus tends to minimize the silo decision making that people are used to. Your water ministry makes its decision, not knowing the impact of such decision on the energy sector, or the energy sector makes a decision and not knowing the impact of that decision on the agriculture sector. So if you have a water food energy nexus interaction and developing policy documents in this relation, it can enable, it can sustain and improve the water use across transboundary locations. Another thing is we can also integrate, we can also utilize transboundary countries or riparian countries in Africa can use the integrated water research management plan. That is a robust plan that has been used and developed to manage water. It is a very good example, a very good resource that can be used to guide countries in that respect. And the last one, we have the Agenda 2063 with the AU developed. So the Agenda 2063 involves the various countries in Africa. We can look at regional corporations. We should increase regional corporations with regards these transboundary problems. If you use water at one side of maybe the Nile River, and someone uses water at another side of the Nile River, there should be some form of communication, sharing of information about usage of over time, or maybe climate condition over time. There should be some form of exchange and agreement between countries. This can enable sustainable use of transboundary water. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jafaru, for this answer. So my fourth question is actually to go back and cycle on those questions. So I want to know, how can Africa, from your own perspective, how can Africa strengthen its governance institutions and reduce corruption to promote good governance and accountability? And most importantly, do you think that corruption is what holds Africa from developing successful economies? And if you think so, can you please provide an example across Africa where cases might apply?
Okay, thank you, Mohamed. So three sides to that question. How can we improve governance? How does corruption affect our Africa's improvements? And the last one, if yes, an example. So I'll start with the first part of the question. How can we improve governance or make governance more transparent in Africa? The first one, I'll take a cue from Nigeria, even though I feel it's not 100%, should I say, optimal. Nigeria has what you call independent corruption organizations that tackle corruption organizations. If we want to make things transparent, we need to have these independent organizations, that's independent corruption fighting organizations, that have no interests, as in no vested interest. They are not partisan. These guys or these organizations can help tackle corruption. In Nigeria, we have what you call the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the EFCC. The EFCC's mandate is to ensure that if they see anything corrupt, they address it, accelerated judgment to be granted that. They are not working optimally because we see some form of partisanship. But if that can be extrapolated to other countries, it will enable more transparency in the way governance is being handled. Another example of improving our governance is whenever contracts come out, whenever people win contracts, or whenever budgets are given, they should be openly transmitted. It should not be in a closed room where the contractors have won it. It should be openly transmitted. While the third one, there should be free press. For governance to happen, you have investigative journalists. There should be a free press. There should be press freedom whereby should I say, there will be no fear of the people in the press about reporting inconsistencies among government or various organizations with regards corruption practices. But that now leads to corruption. Yes, corruption is a major impediment to growth, but I won't say 100%. In Nigeria, it's a major impediment. There's no gainsaying about it. But then I mentioned in the beginning of our discussion, I mentioned greed. Our greed was constructed or built decades ago, but the greeds have not been retrofitted. Corruption, yes, may have impacted it not being retrofitted, but equipment gets outdated over time. Even we have 4 refineries in Nigeria, 4 major refineries in Nigeria. They are outdated. Nigeria continuously pumps in money to, should I say, to retrofit these refineries for them to refine our crude oil. But yet, up till today, we send out our crude oil outside country to get refined. So corruption, in a long way, if I want to put a percentage, over 80% has impacted and stifled the growth of Africa, and especially Nigeria in that respect. I think that's it.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Jafaru, for your answer. So my last question actually involves the technological part and the technological advancements in Africa. So my last question, actually, it's divided into 2 questions. So my first question is, how can Africa harness the potential of AI or artificial intelligence to address its development challenges and promote economic growth? And my second question is that how can Africa build its own capacity and develop a skilled workforce in AI to ensure that it can effectively utilize and shape the development of this technology?
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. 2 questions that you've mentioned. First one is, how can Africa harness AI for development? And the second one, how can we build capacity for AI? So starting with the first one, how can we harness artificial intelligence for development in Africa? There are several ways, but one of the ways is that there should be a continuous public-private partnership engagement. This should continuously be done. And when that is done, there should be tax incentives. 1, there should be grants put in place for private investors into the space to come into the space in order to implement artificial intelligence in Africa. But how can this be done? Government has a role. The role is that it should place guidelines. There should be guidelines for its use in terms of ethics, because ChatGPT just came up, and there are so much opportunities for its use. But then it's a fine line between ethical use of ChatGPT, which is developed on artificial intelligence, and the other way, which is not ethical, non-ethical, unethical. So guidelines should be made. Public-private partnership should be implemented. And the last one, to harness it, there should be a digital infrastructure put in place. Nigeria recently, I think within the past 2-3 weeks, Starlink came into Nigeria. Starlink developed by Elon Musk, the founder of Elon Musk. So that will increase internet capacity, because when you want to harness artificial intelligence, you need internet capacity. So that is going a long way to harness, to improve the capacity to harness artificial intelligence. But how do we build capacity? Leading on to the second question. We can build capacity first by incorporating artificial intelligence curriculum in education sectors. We have to do that consciously. And even that leads to entrepreneurs provide platforms for skill development, boot camps that can help build capacity in that respect. Look for people that are interested in it. Show them the incentives or show them the benefits of joining these. Boot camps can help accelerate building capacity for AI in Africa. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jafaru, for this delighting ideas. So I guess we are at the end of our interview. So thank you so much for your questions, and
thank you, Mohammed.
Extremely happy to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.